So this is 22:30 hours GMT on Monday, the 12th of September 2022. We are starting the broadcast on the Khoodeelaar television channel only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable. And we are doing this broadcast under the continuing theme of Baby Angel Geronimo. You can see Baby Angel Geronimo image on the top right corner, just above my head on the line. And the Baby Angel Geronimo is the symbol of everything that we do in our campaign, and especially centered on the universal values of justice, fairness, transparency, tolerance, and the protection of the innocent. Baby Angel Geronimo was born in New Zealand sometime in 2017, I think. And Baby Angel Geronimo was, let's say, invited to England in the UK by a woman called Helen MacDonald, who lives in South Gloucestershire in the southwest of England. And the baby Angel Geronimo was never ill, in perfect health. This beautiful baby was then targeted, intentionally targeted for vilification, misbranding by the depraved UK Central Government Department, DEFRA, D-E-F-R-A, DEFRA. Not because Baby Angel Geronimo has any physical defects or illnesses, but Baby Angel Geronimo was targeted by DEFRA, and I'm coming to give you the full, those who are not familiar with the kind of full description of DEFRA, I'm going to give them. So DEFRA is the department. The D in the DEFRA is Department for Environment, Food, and Rural Affairs. And it's the government department responsible for the environmental protection, food production and standards, agriculture, fisheries, and rural communities in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And this DEFRA, this particular department, in this kind of form, was configured in 2001. That means that it was during the first term of the regime fronted by Tony Blair, and the jurisdiction says the United Kingdom. And the permanent secretary at the present time at the department is a woman called Tamara Finkelstein, and its headquarters is in Marsham Street, London SW1, and its annual budget is 2.2 billion. And the preceding agencies that it became merged into or merged from or merged with was the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, Department of the Environment, Transport and the Regions. And the subsidiary department is Rural Payments Agency, British Waterways. These are the ones. Now, DEFRA, we call it DEFRA, depraved. Now, what is the meaning of depraved? As based on the atrocities conceived to be perpetrated against the most innocent baby angel Geronimo by the criminals in the department. So depraved meaning, the dictionary meaning, is morally corrupt and wicked. And the Merriam-Webster meaning, let's see a bit more details. So the synonyms are corrupt, debased, debauched, decadent, degenerate, degraded, demoralized, dissipated, dissolute, and so on. And examples of depraved in a sentence, these are the two examples given in this entry. The work of depraved minds. He acted with depraved indifference to human suffering. Now, these are absolutely accurate kind of applied examples, because baby angel Geronimo, when he arrived in the UK from New Zealand, arrived after being subjected to the procedures of testing for health condition, and he was found to be in the best of health, and he remains in the best of health. Remember my use of the word remains in the present indefinite. This will be elaborated on in due course, but baby angel Geronimo is a present witness, and he encompasses, personifies the best and the most authentic witness, observer of the worst in human depravity and evil. And the persons that actually are depraved in the context of the persecution and program of vilification against baby angel Geronimo include a woman called Christine Middlemiss. Middle miss, meaning the middle, the center of her morality is missing. Christine Middlemiss is supposedly the chief veterinary officer employed in the depraved DEFRA. And she is the one who has been, if you like, cited most frequently as giving the technical so-called so-called authoritative, scientific go ahead for the perpetuation and perpetration of the program of vilification, defamation, falsification against the baby angel Geronimo. While for all this time, Helen MacDonald, a woman who has had custody of other members of the same kind of species, they're called alpaca. They're like a camel. It's a camelid family is the wider name. And they look like camels. And baby angel Geronimo absolutely stood there while being held, comforted by Helen MacDonald. While Helen MacDonald was treated to a series of years of cruelty perpetrated on her as a human being, as a being, by liars who were lying against her knowledge, her integrity, her capacity, effectively for her defending her baby. Now, we have been doing this particular set of statements for the best part of the last 1 year. And we shall be updating in due course, of course. And what the behavior of depraved DEFRA, sums up, shows, represents in the worst possible way about the unfitness of this UK state bureaucracy when it is given unaccountable powers to persecute the weakest and the most innocent and the most sage. If baby angel Geronimo were able to speak, and if baby angel Geronimo were able to speak in language that is understandable to human beings about the lies that the depraved DEFRA conceived over years against him, especially the lies centered on the aim to portray this perfectly healthy baby as the opposite of healthy and the opposite of innocent. And the depraved DEFRA were aided and abetted, of course, by the absolute vast kind of majority of the so-called British newspapers, the so-called Fleet Street. Even when the Observer, which is owned by the Guardian, ran a feature piece about a year ago about baby angel Geronimo, it capitulated linguistically, capitulated to the corruption, the corrupt agenda dictated to it and to the media by the depraved DEFRA, and polished and made additionally aggravated by the support of the office of the so-called office of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, held at that time by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. Now, congenital liar absolutely fits the behavior. The congenital liar, this is something that I think is appropriate at this time for this update. For anyone who is watching this for the first time or watching this description and commentary about baby angel Geronimo for the first time. Now, we have been for the last 4 months really daily monitoring. We have not been broadcasting daily, but we have been monitoring the events in Pakistan. The events in Pakistan are the only events anywhere on the face of planet Earth right now and have been for the last 4 months or so. That have been addressing depravity and corruption and lack of accountability and state aided and state enabled kind of robbery. The previous reference to this phrase or phrases related to or applied to South Africa, where an Indian, I think Punjabi origin, Hindu man, a Hindu family called the Guptas, took over the state apparatus in South Africa with the collusion and complicity of a very thoroughly corrupted Jacob Zuma. Now, what has been happening in South Africa? This has become now overtaken by events in Pakistan in terms of the focus on corruption that has been placed by the movement called Tehreek-e-Insaf, that is the regime or administration of Insaf justice, fronted by Tehreek-e-Insaf's founder, chairman, and former Pakistan cricketer, Imran Khan. Now, to those who don't know about Pakistan, East Pakistan, and what is happening in Pakistan of today, need to know that Imran Khan is not, contrary to his kind of cultivated persona as an ordinary politician. He's not really an ordinary politician. He is related to one of the perpetrators of the atrocities against the people of East Pakistan in 1971. That is General Niazi. Now, Niazi was one of the leading Pakistani generals that conducted the mass murders, mass rapes that became known afterwards. Of course, at the time that they were taking place, well, I most certainly didn't know anything was happening in that way to that extent. I did know that the Pakistani military were deployed on the people of East Pakistan to intimidate, to harass, and to submit, to force them to submit to the continuation of the state of Pakistan, with the East Pakistan being part of it. I was busy, two things that I was busy doing during 71 was to save, protect my siblings and my mother. My father was in the UK raising funds and doing campaigns for Bangladesh. But I was in Bangladesh or East Pakistan and forced to physically look after my two sisters and 3 brothers and my mother immediately. And the other extended family, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and cousins and whatever. That is one part of the activities that I was engaged in most of the 9 months. And the other was to commute from Silot to Dhaka and try to keep up with the superficiality. I now know, or later knew, that they were superficial because what was happening on the surface was not really everything that was happening, because there was a guerrilla war movement ongoing. But I didn't see that. Most people of East Pakistan didn't see that. But this is based on the post facto account and so on. At one stage in 1971, I became very seriously ill with a kind of fever that compelled immediate hospitalization. So I became ill in the last week of October 1971. So I was ill with fever in October, but I became very ill, so ill that I was unconscious when I was moved to the hospital from the place of residence. And so I was ill in the October, last days of October, then November. And I was unconscious for most of the period, especially during the last days of the, what became known later, of the aerial attacks by the Indian Air Force on the Pakistani Air Force or Pakistani Army. During those few days, the hospital was evacuated by most people who could walk. I was left there as I was thought I was dead. So I was left under a bed, hospital bed, and they thought that I was dead. So they didn't even touch me because I was that unwell. So when I came back to consciousness, I had no idea what had happened. The first thing I knew was when a fellow inpatient in the hospital, was reading a newspaper. Now, the newspaper title is the one that had changed. The last I remembered was the paper's title being called Doinik Pakistan. And this time, when the man was reading it, another patient, it was called Doinik Bangladesh. So I knew for certain, because nobody else told me anything and nobody else was around to tell me anything, that Bangladesh had been recognized as a state in its own descriptions. And East Pakistan or Pakistan had disappeared. So that was probably 17th, 18th, 19th of December 1971. And physically, I was so weak I couldn't stand because I had not been eating and there had been no real hospital treatments. Nourishment was absent. And there was this woman, a young nurse, who brought food from her own house or home or her parents' home because there was nothing that she could actually feed me on. Her name was Husne Ara. I remember that name. And there was another nurse whose name I forget. But to both of them, I began to promise a simple kind of gift in return for their kindness to me, looking after me, that is. I said, when I went to Silot, the first thing I would do is to buy a whole bag of the best oranges. And I'd come back with the oranges for them. When I went back there, neither Husnara nor the other nurse was there. And the hospital had been completely deserted, well, practically deserted. The man who treated me as the doctor, his name is there in the books, not because he treated me, but he was the doctor at the time in charge, became known as Professor Nurul Islam. He is the one who treated Sheikh Mujib as well. And he later treated the rebel poet Qazi Nazrul Islam. It's a coincidence, complete coincidence. And the place was called the Postgraduate Hospital. And it took me months to be able to walk properly because I was malnourished. Any criminal who has any tales about what I was doing needs to consider what I have just said. I was born a fighter, and I am a fighter. And I was born independent, you criminals. I am the one who fought Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and defeated him, not Sheikh Mujib. I am the leader that created the vacuum that beat Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's ambitions in the 1960s and allowed the so-called Awami League to claim to be a political party. None of the morons ever had, nor have they had since, the guts or the abilities to understand the task that I performed in less than 20 minutes when I beat Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at that confrontation, which was brought about accidentally, as far as I'm concerned, at the Institute of Engineers. We'll come back to further details of all of this. So effectively, if there was a political general leading the task for the Awami League, but not the Awami League, the Bangladesh movement, that general is me. I beat Bhutto to a pulp. He never recovered. Now, whatever Imran Khan has been saying about Bhutto's grandson, mocking Bilawal Bhutto for not speaking Urdu properly, Imran Khan has no idea just how silly he comes across when he mocks Bilawal Bhutto about Bilawal Bhutto's lack of Urdu proficiency. I am the descendant of the saint Bed Shah. And I am the personification of Badshah and have been ever since my grandmother, Tayyibun Nasa, identified me as the true inheritor of the Badshah. Everything I do resembles what Badshah did. Badshah could have had billions, literally billions. And he said no. And I could have had billions, literally billions. Instead, I have focused on the telling the truth, looking for the truth. Now, Imran Khan has been making a mistake, not because his intention is to make that mistake, but he's being, in that respect, he's being kind of opportunistic. His relation, Niazi, one of the generals, as I was saying, let's see. Of course, Imran Khan is also related to somebody that people in East Pakistan are independently very fond of. Is Nahid Niazi. Nahid Niazi, the singer who was married to an East Pakistani called Muslewuddin, a composer, lyricist, and a great artist and creative genius. Now, I think Nahid Niazi is in Canada now. She was in the UK for many years. But Nahid Niazi is respected and very highly thought of because of her talents and her spontaneity and her abilities. And what happened with the Pakistan army that Imran Khan doesn't want to talk truthfully about, the reason is related to his relationship with the family relationship with Niazi. Let's see about Niazi. So we shall find Imran Khan's relationship with Niazi. So I'm doing transparent research here, right in front of the camera. So let's see where this Niazi is located in. He didn't die that long ago. Niazi, the general, died during this century. But Imran Khan, for family reasons, I think, so his name was Allah Bakhsh Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi, not Allah Bakhsh. Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi was a lieutenant general in the Pakistan army. And he had been born in 1915. There was no date when he was born, but the year is recorded on the wiki entry. And he's reported here as having died on the 1st of February 2004. It says that he was a Pakistan army general. And then the next sentence says that during the Bangladesh Liberation War and the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, remember the two things they are mentioning there. He commanded the Pakistan Eastern Command in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and was the principal signatory on the Pakistani instrument of surrender vis-a-vis Jagjit Singh Arora of the Indian Eastern Command and the Bangladesh forces. Now, the Wikipedia entry is being dishonest as well, because the signatories don't show any Bangladesh forces. It was the Indian Punjabis mainly, Jagjit Singh Arora. accepting the surrender of his fellow Punjabis, Niazi. So the witty entry, of course, is qualified by all kinds of conditions anyway. Niazi's area of responsibility comprised the defense of East Pakistan from India during the war in 1971, and the authors and critics within the Pakistan military held him morally responsible for his decision to unilaterally surrender the Pakistan Eastern Command, which resulted in the war's end in a decisive Indian victory as well as the independence of Bangladesh. After being taken and held as a prisoner of war by the Indian military, he was repatriated to Pakistan on the 30th of April 1975 as part of the Delhi Agreement. He was dishonorably discharged from his military service. At the War Inquiry Commission led by Hamudur Rahman, we shall talk more about Hamudur Rahman and the commission, etc., in due course, not necessarily in one edition or in this edition, but I'm just introducing the contemporary context for the discussion of what happened in the subcontinent in the 75 years since August 1947. I am absolutely outraged by the timidity, short-sightedness, and stupidity of the Pakistanis, the Indians, and the now Bangladeshis, so-called leaders at every stage. None of these morons has understood or has shown the ability to understand the meaning of independence or freedom. And Imran Khan, I have to say, is of course, a cricketer, and he's not a very well-read person anyways. He's just beginning to show that he has become familiar with Allama Iqbal and others. So I give him the benefit of the doubt, let's say. And I'm still not convicting him of any dishonorable intent because it's a complex issue. I'm having to deal with the whole of the subcontinent. If you read the works of the Indian scholars and so-called historians, and if you read the contents of their counterparts in Pakistan, what remains of Pakistan, and what was Pakistan up to the 16th of December 1971, you will find that all of them, absolutely all of them, end up being incomplete in their perception, in their understanding. I am not among them. I am the one who is pointing this out. And it's because I am the one who is pointing this out, stands me out as the different one. And I am forever at war with these criminal colluders. Part of what Niraj Chaudhuri wrote, he started by his landmark autobiography of an unknown Indian. And he degenerated because he started good. He started with a lot of promises, if you like. The promises that parallels or echo quite a few of the things that Rabindranath Tagore said in his later years when he was forced to beg for money from the Westerners in his later years. So Niraj Chaudhary's last Bengali book is in many ways echo of Rabindranath Tagore. But neither Niraj Chaudhary nor Tagore belonged in the class, in the standard, in the sphere occupied by the leader of thought for freedom, independence, universality. That is Qazi Nazrul Islam. When some non-Bengalis spontaneously paid tribute to Sher-e-Bangla Fazlul Haq from Barisal, the big man from Barisal, they did that because they were absolutely astounded by the appearance of a man like Sher-e-Bangla Fazlul Haq among so many pygmies of man and slaves, mental slaves. So Imran Khan is doing grave injustice to Sher-e-Bangla Fazlul Haq, and of course he is showing contemptible ignorance of the fighter, leader, writer, poet Qazi Nazrul Islam. We'll be talking about all of those more. Bolo Veer, Bolo Unnotom Shir, Shir Nehari Amari, Notor Shir Oi Shikor Himadrir. I'm the one who can recite that poem like this. Nobody else, not even Nazrul's son. Because Nazrul's son is a plastic performer. I am not. I am a descendant, ideological, ethical and moral descendant of Nazrul Islam. And I'm a carrier of the badge and banner of Subhash Bose. So Niazi was a relation to Imran Khan. So it's family reasons that have been stopping Imran Khan from telling the truth about East Pakistan in the way that he should have been telling, but he has not been telling. Because Niazi was the general that was actually in charge of the military's operation against East Pakistan. So let's say what the wiki entry is saying about Niazi, about his. I mean, he apparently wrote this book. As is known, Imran Khan is a mixed Pashtun background and Punjabi background, as was Niazi, who was born in Mianwali, British India, 1915, into a mixed Punjabi and Pashtun family. His village, Balokhel, is located on the eastern bank of the Indus River. And so on. So that is about Niazi, just a kind of very sketchy introduction to Niazi. It's really contextually about understanding Imran Khan. Imran Khan is not himself being fully accurate or factual or truthful, and not a single Pakistani so-called commentator, and I mean those who are apparently supporters of Imran Khan's, they are not telling the truth, and they don't appear to know the history of the subcontinent, and they don't seem to understand the context. And this is the problem that is my responsibility to explain, untangle, and get rid of. I'm not going to be stalled by this problem. So let's go to Imran Khan's entry on the Wikipedia, because this is the quickest way we can get hold of the information. The other full detailed biography would take hours. So Imran Khan, I'm looking for the actual connection with Niazi. Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi. Okay, so Imran Khan, I grew up as a reciter and reader of Nazrul, and I wasn't involved with Netaji's mobilization, but spiritually and mentally and morally, I belonged with both of them. And what Netaji said about Nazrul is the truth. Netaji said that of all the people that he had come across in terms of literature, etc., and rhetorics and whatever, Nazrul was the one who came across as the lively one, as the one who was alive. Subhash Bose called Nazrul Janto Manush, Zita Manush, the only one. It takes a Zita Manush to recognize another Zita Manush. Let's put it this way, yeah? And all the criminals that are in various offices of these states in the Republic of India, in Pakistan, and in Bangladesh, they don't want to talk about the real issues, the real fighters, and the real continuation of the battle against the East India Company that is continuing. Now, here is Imran Khan's note. Let's see what they say. So Imran Khan's Twitter account has got, the one that I'm looking at, has got 8,160 tweets at this time. And his account is called Imran Khan PTI, that is Pakistan Tehreek Insaf. And his description is chairman, his profile description is chairman, Pakistan Tehreek Insaf, and former Prime Minister of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Now that is interesting. And the website is called insaf.pk. And Imran Khan joined Twitter in March 2010. Well, there are entries in Urdu which I cannot read, but the English item was posted 13 hours ago, and it's talking about Shabazz Sharif and others. I think for evidence on this record, I'll get this account included in the list that we are following. And it's a horrible suggestion that comes up. It says that there are 3 other accounts that this suggests we should follow. The middle one is Maryam Nawaz Sharif. The very last thing we want to do is to follow Maryam Nawaz Sharif. She is complete in corruption, completely covered in corruption. All right, so Imran Khan, we shall be doing his full entry just to establish the extent to which Wikipedia is being opportunistic about Imran and his links, family links with, I'm just going to, with A.K. Niazi, Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi. I was selected in the 1960s to go to Kakul, the military academy. I didn't go there because my mother created such a scene. My mother said that I would be in danger of being unnecessarily killed in the military pursuit or whatever. So that's why I didn't go there. Let's see where his Well, the entry doesn't mention Niazi. I'm still looking. So the entry of the entry that I read previously, which mentioned Niazi, has of course been heavily edited, and if Niazi is not mentioned, then that is partly due to the political reasons behind the heavy editing and deletions. But let's say that it is widely known that he is related to Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi and also to Nahid Niazi, who is Amir Abdullah Khan's niece. So, I mean, Imran Khan would be a niece, sorry, a nephew to Niazi. But let's put that detailed examination aside for the time being and return to the reasons why currently Imran Khan is refusing to tell everything that he knows already about what happened in 1971 and what the Pakistan military did against the people of East Pakistan. I have been publishing for the last 3 years plus detailed demands that Imran Khan should start by first of all acknowledging in full the fact that innocent civilians were targeted for massacre, rape, and other criminality and violations of human rights. I make a distinction between civilians, and I'll come to that reason, and that those who survive as relations of the victims, or those, some of whom, they're minority in numbers, who survive as actual direct victims, must be provided with immediate compensation. No compensation would be anywhere near enough as compensation for what they've been through, but it would be a token. And it would be a token marking the beginning of something that has been overdue, the recognition of the injustice that has been done and the burden of providing justice that has been owed to the victims in East Pakistan. Imran Khan has to do that. He hasn't done that. Now, it is very interesting for me to notice that when there was this, because there have been many kind of miniature seminars being held in between Imran Khan's jalsas or gatherings or rallies and his appearances in court and other engagements. Various kind of semi-scholarly seminars have been being held. And one was held with one of the bar association, that is to say, one of the associations of lawyers, licensed law traders. I was struck by the unique perception expressed at one of the seminars by one of the speakers. The speaker, of course, is much older than Imran Khan and much wiser than any of the others that were present or I have seen so far in any of the gatherings. Now, this man is the first one anywhere, apart from myself, of course, that has been talking about the context. Now, of course, I go back to Bangalore and Tipu Sultan and others, but the real events that took place in the 1750s around Calcutta and the culmination in the June 1757 conspiracy by Mir Zafar Ali Khan and other criminal traitors. Because those events of the 1750s kind of mirror the things that, in a reverse way, let's say, what has been happening. I mean, the creation of the myths. I mean, Imran Khan has no proof to substantiate his claim or his description. He doesn't say it as a claim, but he says it as a kind of description, as a casual kind of description, that the Awami League was the target of the Pakistan military. It wasn't. The Pakistan military in 1971 was not targeting the Awami League because the Awami League was not a military formation, and it was never a military formation. It is a rag bag of all kinds of elements that have no idea as to what they are doing, except to desperately try to seek their own particular immediate benefit. These are the people that created the kind of chaos by exposing Sheikh Mujib to any number of plots, one of which succeeded in August 1975. And Sheikh Mujib was, in my knowledge of him, observing him over 3 years, intensely observing him, Sheikh Mujib was a particularly ill-briefed individual, not aware of the historic events and historic currents. And he was not a strategist. What he did was, behave like one of those characters from uncertain ancient times in a village, hitting his chest with bravado and saying no one can touch him. Sheikh Mujib was not suitable leader for independence or liberation or whatever. I'll come to that in this edition very briefly, but very clearly. He could have been legally assassinated or executed by the Pakistan army or Pakistan state at the time. And I saved him from that. I saved him from that by not publishing his very ignorant and ill-advised boast. Because according to international law, any state that is in the state of being a state like Pakistan at the time, and I'm talking about 6th of September 1970, not 6th of September 1965, but 6th of September 1970 is when I was at the place 32, number 32, Dhanmondi, where Sheikh Mujib was murdered later. Five years later. So Sheikh Mujib had just returned from one of those very tense kind of discussions in West Pakistan. And I was one of the 4 or 5 journalists that were allowed access to Sheikh Mujib. And we went to the number 32 to have a short briefing from him about his experience, which was obviously a negative experience. And he said he didn't speak for long, and we didn't stay there for long. It was a few minutes, literally a few minutes. There was no tea, there was nothing. I'm saying there was no tea just to suggest that the shortness of the event, not because I was expecting or needed to be entertained to tea or whatever. And Sheikh Mujib gave a speech lasting maybe 2 minutes about his talks with those people in West Pakistan. He didn't name them. He said those, them, whatever, which is the term that I use again about them as well. And he said that I won't let them land in Dhaka. Now, that was 6th of September 1970. That was 3 months before the election that took place eventually in December 1970. Sheikh Mujib was breaking the code against treason. Because what he was saying is that he would ban members of the state from entering or landing at another part of the same state. That is treason. And he had no authority, nor authority in any shape or form whatsoever. So, to their credit as well, but I mean, I don't know about any of the others that were with me, how much of what Sheikh Mujib said to us they kept secret. But it was open to me to make it public by writing a report about Sheikh Mujib. And Sheikh Mujib would have been arrested and tried for treason, without any doubt. Now, what would happen would have been different from what happened later when the Pakistan army kind of confined him during the duration of the 9 months. Because during the duration of those 9 months, the international kind of clamor for Sheikh Mujib's freedom, etc., was based on a legitimate series of events and claims. But if the Pakistan authorities at the time had a martial court or military court or whatever to try Sheikh Mujib for treason, and sentence him accordingly for treason. According to international law, the international jurisdiction would not apply to intervene, because on the 6th of September 1970, Sheikh Mujib had no legitimacy in terms of anything recognized in international law. He was not a head of state, he was not a head of provincial state, he was not a head of government, he was not a head of a government department, he was not a head of the army, military, whatever. So he had no authority. And to say that he would ban would mean that he was inciting sedition by others. Now, those morons who claim to have written all this stuff and done the battles and whatever have absolutely been ignorant and liars. The main liar, of course, in popular terms, who has been made into an industry of lies about his connection with Sheikh Mujib, is, of course, Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry. One Hamidul Haq Chaudhry from Noakhali in East Pakistan, who owned the Pakistan Observer and other things, published the Purbodesh as a daily newspaper in January 1970. Hamidul Haq Chaudhry knew the lowly, greedy, parasitical personality of Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry. He said, Leia khai all bad zinish. So he gave whatever he had to give him to Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry to make him write anything against Sheikh Mujib, which is what he did. So on the front page of the Purbodesh, there was a piece on the right-hand column which included words to the effect. I'm not quoting, of course. I cannot quote. I mean, this is how long ago? Into the 6th decade. Words to the effect that Sheikh Mujib, and it was a byline, it was a piece byline to Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry in the Hamidul Haq Chaudhry's daily paper, the Purbodesh, newly launched as a daily, the Purbodesh Weekly. And Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry had written to order, let's say. Hamidul Haq Chaudhry said, "Hey, Gulam, lech, khotosas." So he wrote. He said that Sheikh Mujib was the leader or the head or front person of an undemocratic mess. Remember, that was January 1970. Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry wrote that in the daily Bengali newspaper called Purbodesh, owned by the well-established quote Pakistan movement businessman Hamidul Haq Chaudhry. So wasn't it more than a surprise to have to be told by idiotic, ignorant, indescribably stupid Siloti morons who became fans of these liar, in the UK, that Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry was the biggest intellectual with the highest integrity and all the rest of the rubbish. Come to that in a minute about Notun Din. Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry began to establish an industry around himself, claiming that he was, if not the most closest confidant to Sheikh Mujib, but he was the leading one who was like given exclusive access to Sheikh Mujib's innermost core thoughts about the future, etc., etc. Nothing could be further from the truth. In 3 years that I observed Sheikh Mujib from 1967 to 1970, I observed Sheikh Mujib at political level, never at personal level. I was not either personally involved in any dealings with Sheikh Mujib, nor was I interested in. I was observing Sheikh Mujib as the product of those people's fantasies who sold a fantasy saying that a state roughly based on then East Pakistan, away from its federal existence created in 1947, would be viable for the people as an independent state. Because the demography and the geography, and I'll come to the events in the High Court in India yesterday about the Indian High Court accepting an application by Hindus to be granted to take over a mosque and turn it into a de facto temple and start Hindu worship in the mosque. This is happening now. So for Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry to say that it was Muhammad Ali Jinnah's fault to create the Dijati Tattva is a criminal untruth that has to be punishable by Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry being tried for crimes that he has been committing. So when the Bengali woman, Bengali born, highly capable, highly enlightened woman, very rare in terms of the enlightenment, in terms of the scope and the range of our knowledge about the events that were happening in the subcontinent. The Bengali born woman, Sarojini Naidu, who became Naidu afterwards, Sarojini Chattopadhyay, she became a Naidu by marriage. She was absolutely brilliant, objectively definable as a brilliant, independent-minded person. I mean, she is, let's say, a role model, a forerunner, a kind of early role model for some of the women that are struggling in India today. She, Sarojini Naidu, just over 100 years ago, published an essay on Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And that essay reflected the very wide opinion about Jinnah. That he was the man that was trying to bring together Hindu and Muslims against the British. Jinnah was being described at that time as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. Now, Imran Khan has only mentioned the Hindu-Muslim unity. He has not mentioned Sarojini Naidu, as far as I can see. And Imran Khan would not know the real, objective, contextual spread of the background. I mean, Jinnah himself paid tribute to Gokhale, a Hindu leader. And Gokhale was very fond of Jinnah. And Jinnah was respectful, appreciative of M.K. Gandhi. And Gandhi was respectful, appreciative, but they had the differences. But it was Naidu, Sarojini Naidu, who summed up the gist of the knowledge and the evidence about Jinnah's role and his personality. She correctly called him almost emaciated. I mean, Jinnah was, while he was at Lincoln's Inn as a student, he was being given the he was very tall, and he was being given the nickname that fitted his very slender figure. Sarojini Naidu called him emaciated, which meant that he nearly almost looked like he was going to collapse. But she then said that carried in that emaciated frame, I mean, she described in that essay, was a giant, unparalleled. For Abdul Kuffar Chowdhury to call Jinnah all kinds of names and to say that Jinnah's Pakistan was Azimpur graveyard shows stupidity beyond endurance. Jinnah, as Imran Khan has correctly used the description, because it isn't Imran Khan's original description. Most of his speeches are not his original descriptions. Imran Khan has said that in a population of hundreds of millions of mentally enslaved people, enslaved to the British, Ali Jinnah was the only free-thinking leader. Which is absolutely correct. Which is why both the British as well as the Brahmins, when it came to the real kind of contest, were absolutely terrified of facing Jinnah. He was brilliant at the speed of light. Always. They could never handle him. And it's that kind of brilliance that brought about a political end to the slogan that the British had created around the Brahmins by establishing the Indian National Congress. It was the British who founded the Indian National Congress because they knew that they would have to leave the subcontinent. So they created the Indian National Congress based on the false nationality that actually contained the seeds of suffocating the Muslims and other numerical minorities. by giving dominance for the first time in 1,000 years to the Brahmins. Because for the 1,000 years preceding, Muslims had actually led the way in some of the most advanced administrative, democratic, and civil society reforms and measures. I mean, the Taj Mahal is an example of the excellence of what the Muslims were about and were engaged in doing. And Imran Khan has not mentioned Taj Mahal. He has not mentioned Tagore. He has not mentioned, of course, the Bidrui poet. He's only mentioned Iqbal and he's mentioned Jinnah, which is fine. Jinnah is fine, Iqbal is fine, because I am a fan of Muhammad Iqbal as I am a fan of his teacher, Maulana Rumi. And Maulana Rumi is the teacher of Nazrul, teacher of many others. So the reason why Imran Khan has been talking in the way that he has been talking about East Pakistan is to do with his family. He cannot say that. And the crisis created by the crooks in Pakistan is so deep and widespread that the people who know that Imran Khan is related to Niazi and is limited by that relationship are keeping quiet, because there are two kind of fronts on which they are having to fight these people. The uprising. I call it revolution because not all revolutions are the same. But this is a revolution happening in Pakistan that should have been happening over the last 75 years, but it is happening 75 years too late, but it is happening. Imran Khan refers ignorantly to the cyclones in East Pakistan. How dare he? How dare he? People were killed in their thousands, hundreds of thousands. The first cyclone that hit East Pakistan, Chittagong and others, I mean, it was for its time what later became the tsunami. The tsunami actually, when it was so devastating. The people of Chittagong and the southern coast of East Pakistan suffered what later became the tsunami. And yet the politicians from the West Pakistan part never ever told the truth about the extent of the suffering and the losses of the people of East Pakistan. So Imran Khan saying that the cyclones in East Pakistan were being kind of blamed by the West Pakistanis for the whatever losses and damages the people of East Pakistan suffered is a criminal denial on various levels. The cyclones did not happen because of the people of East Pakistan. The cyclones happened because of climate change, even in the 1960s. and the repercussions, the consequences, the aftermaths, the losses that followed the cyclones, of course, were to be blamed on the so-called leaders that claimed to be leaders of Pakistan at the time. And for Imran Khan to pack his current mass gatherings, speeches, with that kind of lies against East Pakistan reminds of the stupidly commissioned book titled Friends Not Masters, that Ayub Khan tried to claim credit for. It is, of course, ghost written by a number of people that Ayub Khan paid. Those people are mainly Western Europeans, and some of the researchers were from Pakistan itself. But in the part that is no longer there in the book, Ayub Khan blamed the people of East Pakistan right across the board. He made no exception. He said that the people in the regions that formed the West Pakistan at the time were in the main warrior people, fighters, the tribes of fighters in general, kind of. Whereas the people of East Pakistan mainly were people that were of the lower classes or lower births and origins, including fishermen and whatever. Of course, Ayub Khan never visited Silot because the people of Silot include very different backgrounds and origins of people. And I'm not saying all of them, but it's a lot of them. That Ayub Khan could generalize in the way that he did in the original editions of the Friends Not Masters did not show so much his ignorance, but his arrogant contempt for the idea of Pakistan. So it is pathetic of Imran Khan to claim that he is popularizing the slogan, Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah. How dare he? If Pakistan ki matlab was la ilaha illallah, what part of la ilaha illallah gave the Pakistan military any go ahead to do what they did to the innocent civilians? And what part of the matlab Pakistan did Imran Khan use or find giving him any reason to maintain silence for the last 50 years? There is none. So Imran Khan boya tabiz pore, tabiz laga ato tabiz pore, tosbi nani, tosbi gone tar, camera dekha jay je tosbi loiya জলসা যায়. Who is he kidding? Pakistan ka matlab is not evident in the behavior that he has been engaged in most of his life. If Pakistan ka matlab was La ilaha illallah, which it was, because I remember the slogans in the village, in the home, in the house, they were saying there, Lord Kalenge Pakistan. Then that man who spoke at the seminar was the only teller of the truth. The real Pakistan was East Pakistan. That man said that the Punjabis didn't want Pakistan. The Sindhis didn't want Pakistan. I think the man was being economical because of the circumstances of the event, the time that he was speaking. So he was accommodating Imran Khan and the mob that would actually attack him if he said the actual details. So Imran Khan may be riding the waves, but the revolution will not come if Imran Khan fails to understand that a true revolution can only happen if the truth is told by the ones claiming to be involved in the revolution. Bolo Veer, Bolo Unnoto Mamoshir, Shir Nehari Amari, Noto Shir, Oi Shikor Himadrir. Nobody, not even Iqbal, most certainly not Tagore, nobody has written anything like that. And nobody will. None of these fighting poems, they call rebel, but they're fighting poems, liberation poems, absolutely world class, leading, no language. In no continent has anything like Nazrul been written. Durgam Giri Kantar Moru, Dustor Parabar, লঙ্ঘিতে হবে রাত্রি নিশীতে যাত্রীরা হুঁশিয়ার. Saint, total saint. Nazrul was not the national poet that the Awami League wanted. Nazrul, the truth about Nazrul, belatedly being accepted as the national poet, was an inevitability based on this power and the strength and the universality and the uniqueness of his creations. There is absolutely no evidence. There is absolutely no evidence in anything that Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry has talked about, has written, or supported that comes anywhere near a millionth, 1 part of a million parts of what Qazi Nazrul Islam has written. And in his contempt, Abdul Kuffar Chowdhury forgot Nazrul. He doesn't write about Nazrul. He's scared. Just as the mental slaves across the subcontinent were scared of coming across Ali Jinnah, they're still scared of his image. They dare not mention him. And Imran Khan is a very stupid boy. He uses the term Mera. When he refers to Iqbal and Jinnah, he refers personally to them being his leader. He doesn't say Hamara. How dare he, being so crafty? Who gave him the authority to claim Iqbal or Jinnah to himself? So I'm taking apart Imran Khan's revolution. When we demonstrated, I supported the demonstration in principle in the early 1960s in Silot, when I took part in the demonstration as a flavor, as a fervor against Ayub Khan. And the slogan for a university in Silot provided the perfect example. And I remember 3 languages being used in the slogans. The first one was in Urdu, second in English, and the third was in Bengali. Hamare Mutaleba, Silot University. Our demand, Silot University. Amader Dabi, Silot University. Mutaleba in 61 and Matlab in 47. 14 years difference. So all the careerist opportunists that went berserk in their oiling, তেল মারার যে বিপ্লব তারা লাগাইছিল, চাকরির তেল, এটা 1971 বাদে ইন্ডিয়ায় পাকিস্তানের আর্মিরে ডিফিট দেওয়ার বাদে বাংলাদেশের ইন্ডিয়ান রাজাকার হলে শুরু করছেন দলাল ভুয়াইন। কলকাতাত গিয়া ফুয়াইনতে লুচ্চামি করছেন আর ডাকাতাইয়া তারা বীরত্ব দেখাইছে। গোলামর ফুয়াইন। কলকাতার মমতা ব্যানার্জি যে পরিমাণ নরেন্দ্র মোদীর বিরুদ্ধে লাগছে, যে পরিমাণ আন্দোলন তাই করে একদিনে মোদীর বিরুদ্ধে, শেখ হাসিনায় সারা লাইফে তাই পলিটিক্যাল কোনো ক্যাম্পেইন ইলা করছে না, কোনো প্রিন্সিপাল লাগে। মমতা ব্যানার্জি হইল গিয়া মেইন অপোজিশন on behalf of the states, the eastern states, against the Brahmins. আর শেখ হাসিনা নিরাই গিয়া বই থাকে মোদির বেড়ার তলে। দিস বাউন্ড টু। আর যেগুনতে শেখ হাসিনার বিরুদ্ধে মাতন কইন যে বাংলাদেশি পেট্রিয়ট সোলজার হলরে মারছে হাসিনায়, এটা তো গণহত্যা করছে আর এটার বিচার হইব। দিজ আর জোকার্স। কতগু বারইছইন তারা ভিডিও বানাইয়া মাতে কয় তারা ইটা জানে এগে আরগুর সম্পর্কে মাতে রেফারেন্স দেয়। এটা কিতা হয় খারে ইটা বুকামির স্বর্গত নিছে। হাসিনার বিরুদ্ধে ইটা কোনো গুণায় politically. This is all about politics. Politically, they are not against Hasina's politics. Why? Because all of them are themselves covered in criminality and corruption of one sort or another. আমি যখন এনায়েতুল্লাহ খান রে আমি যখন তারে বেইজ্জত করলাম ঢাকা প্রেস ক্লাবও, আমি কইলাম যে তুই খাইল রাইত ইন্টারকন্টিনেন্টাল হোটেলও মদ খাইছত, তুই কিতা খস তুই সোশ্যালিস্ট আর কিতা খস তুই ওয়েস্টার্নের দলাল নাই। I alone could do that to Anayatullah Khan. There never was anyone. There isn't anyone. So Bandir Fainte বানোয়াট ইতিহাস বানাইছেন না। এনায়েতুল্লাহ খানের ভাই দেখুন সোশ্যালিস্ট, আগুন সোশ্যালিস্ট নাই। রাশেদ খান, আবেদ খান, ইতা খান সকলটি খানে সুবিধাবাদী। আর বাফর নাম বেশি সকলটিয়ে পলিটিক্স আইসেন বুর্জোয়া ফুয়াইন কিতা সমাজতন্ত্রী কোন ক্যারিয়ার স্যাক্রিফাইস করলো কোন নীতির লাগি। দ্যাট ইজ দ্য টেস্ট। So Imran Khan is not going to get away by creating a fantasy image for himself. তসবি পড়া হইলো সকল থেকে যোগ আর সকল থেকে বড় যোগ হইল ও তসবি লইয়া যে জলসাত যায়। ইমরান খানের এই জেমস গোল্ডস্মিথর ফুড়িরে বিয়া করার আগে ইমরান খানে অন্তত 4-5 এই ওয়েস্টার্ন বেটিনতর লগে তার সম্পর্ক আছে। এটা কোনো অটোমেটিক কোনো ক্রাইম না, কিন্তু হে যে নমুনায় এখন সুরত ধরছে এইটা আসলে বেইমানি। আর যে সংক্ষেপে মাতে হয় my 20 years in England, my 20 years there, 20 years there, সংক্ষেপে মাতে বেনজির ভুট্টোর লগে তার বিয়া হইতো 2 মাস আছিল বেনজির ভুট্টোর লগে তার সম্পর্ক। এটা কোন নীতি গিয়ে এটা হইছিল। এখন বেনজির ভুট্টো যে সময় তার লগে যে সম্পর্ক হয় তখন আমি এক ইংলিশ পেপার এডিট করি, আর তখন আমার পিএ ফুড়ি সাদা ফুড়ি তাইরে আমি কইলাম বলে বেনজির ভুট্টোরে ফোন কর। তো বেনজির ভুট্টোরে ফোন করে এখন ধরা দেয় না। তো আমি আমার এইগুলো অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্টে কইলাম বলে তুই খোসাই জিকা হর তাই যে গে আনসার দে ফোন ওগুলো জিজ্ঞা হর যে বেনজির ভুট্টোর আইডিয়া কিতা, আইডিওলজি কিতা, তার পারপাস কিতা। কয়েকদিন ফোন করার বাদে কোনো আনসার নাই, মানে কোনো এই প্রশ্নের কোনো উত্তর নাই। তখন আমি যে হেডলাইন দিলাম, যে স্টোরি লিখলাম, এটার হেডলাইন দিলাম আমি যে বেনজির মিনস মিনিং নাথিং। এখন দেখা যায় যে বেনজিরে এগু দুগুনা খালি ইমরান খান না আরো কতগুলো লোকে তাইর সম্পর্ক আছে। এটা আমি মনে করি না ক্রাইম হিসাবে, বাট ইট গিভস এ গাইডেন্স, এ গাইড এন আইডিয়া। It gives an idea about somebody's integrity and reliability. এগুলো আমি কইছি লাইজ ট্রাস, লিজ ট্রাস আমি বানাইছি লাইজ ট্রাস। তাই অলরেডি ম্যারিড, তাই জামাইয়ের লোকে আরো ম্যারিড এমপির লোকে তাই সম্পর্ক করিলায়। এটা তো খুব ডিফিকাল্ট রানি। এখন আবার হৌ জামাইরে লইয়া এখন তাই এখন ডিসপ্লে করে। That is evidence of his corruption, complicity, and her audacity and immorality. Of course, as a woman, she cannot be like a man, Boris Johnson, but she is the nearest thing to Boris Johnson when it comes to adultery and the absence of apology to the public. And it tells a story about the Conservative Party. They didn't care. They didn't care about Boris Johnson being such a totally adulterous person. And they didn't care about Liez Truss. And the fact that somebody like Boris Johnson or somebody like Liez Truss could get into the position of number 10 Downing Street in this country gives the complete proof that Keir Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party. I mean, they showed footage in the last few days of Starmer and Tony Blair grinning as they shook hands during their appearances over the passing of Brenda. Brenda meaning the monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. There has been in the first few months of the COVID, there was this man, Captain Tom, who was doing the walk in his gardens or in his house or in his home area, apparently raising funds for the NHS, which was given very high media coverage and promotion for understandable reasons. What does it say? That of all the other communities, the only impersonator that the channel slaves found as the hero was a man who was not 100 years old, but claimed to be 100 years old. That man should be forced to publish the full documentation of his birth. No forgery. I know that man. How dare he do that, inflict himself as an imitator of Captain Tom? And how dare the liars at Channel S give him the platforms that they did give him? Have they no shame? Why did it have to be an act of imitation? That shows the mental slavery is complete. When Thomas Babington Macaulay, who was the author of the English education system allegedly for India in the 1830s, published his contemptible kind of reasoning and rationale, condemning Arabic, condemning Hindi, condemning Urdu. When he said those things about the comparative inferiority of those languages, there is no record. There is no evidence of contemporary kind of objections by those who claim to be representatives of Islam or their counterparts in the Brahmin schools. And the fact that from 1757 to 1947, 190 years, a small, tiny number of people from the British Isles could rule the whole subcontinent the way that they did rule. Actually proved, absurdly proved, the confidence with which Macaulay wrote. It's amazing, isn't it, that the British hanged people for telling the truth. And this is not something that Abd al-Kuffar Chowdhury even recognizes as a theoretical likelihood. Condemn the kuffar and condemn all the other kuffars. I condemn also a kafir that abused my hospitality, well, my generosity. This kafir came from the University of Rajshahi and did a PhD at Cambridge. So the kafir befriended me in Dhaka in the 1960s. And I felt sorry for the moron. And in good faith, I gave him my father's address in London as an acquaintance. What he did then was to entirely take over my father's kind of one aspect of his life and tell people that he was related to us. And my father actually spent a lot of money because my father was like that. He would, anyone who said that they were related to me and my friend or acquaintance became like somebody that he felt a duty to help. Now, this Kafir boy was Abdul Jabbar Beg. This Kafir boy, criminal, became an Islamic scholar, so called, has done about 50 little Islamic books. This shaitan may have written books about Islam, but he was a shaitan. I shall be talking about this shaitan fully in due course. My great grandfather, the spiritual philanthropist, the spiritual leader, Bedshah, traveled extensively in Central Asia. He was an early kind of campaigner for education against the British. But he didn't depend on the British, and he didn't actually keep himself confined to the British. He traveled extensively in Central Asia and gathered knowledge and shared knowledge and insights. And he had followers, people following him literally. And he traveled extensively means literally extensively. He hardly stayed at home. So when he stayed at home, people came from far and wide seeking his blessings and in the hope that he would pray for them, those who were suffering various untreatable diseases, etc., etc. And as a miracle, according to the tales told by my grandmother, Begum Tayyibun Nisa, God helped him, and without any exception, all the people that sought my great grandfather's help were healed. So grateful were they. Now imagine this is thousands of people coming to our house, not at once, but in a row, in rows. Whenever they heard that he was at home, they would flock. So it's like thousands and thousands of people. So you add together the acres by the thousands. How much does it amount? They offered him that because after being healed, nothing was more important to them. No material possessions was important to them, as important as their health and their recovery. So they offered in gratitude. And my great grandfather said, absolutely not. He said his prayers and his blessings were not some kind of surreptitious, secret way of inducing them to part with their possessions. No way. He was praying for them, and he meant he was praying for them. That's what I am. I fight for a cause, fight for the truth. There is no secret device hidden that I would, as a return, to my fighting be rewarded in a material way? My great grandfather would have got the equivalent in material currency terms of what Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, to name only four, cannot even dream of having. There were streams of people offering everything they had. So if I tell the truth about the corrupt mayor system in Tower Hamlets, I don't tell that lightly. I don't tell that as an accident. If I tell the lies that Galloway has perpetrated at the expense of our community, I don't do that because I have no enough evidence. If I tell the truth about the Bangladeshi so-called what shall I call them? They cannot be leaders. They cannot be anything. These are thieves and crooks. One thief, when I first encountered this crook, Michael Crook, apparently he calls himself Professor Michael Keith, with a base at the University of Oxford, apart from other places. When I come across this crook for the first time, I had on that day only maybe an hour or so before I actually encountered this criminal. I had suffered the experience of having to listen to the Day's World at One program on the BBC Radio 4, on which this liar, Michael Crook, had made a claim to the effect that he knew the Bengalis. He knew the Bengalis and he cared about the Bengalis, etc., etc. So when I went down the Cannon Street Road from New Road, and I entered what looked like a newly opened kind of eatery or eating place or sweets place. And it turned out that the conversation produced the identity of this criminal. And as soon as he said that he was Michael Creeth, I asked him if it was him that had been on the radio, BBC Radio, only a short while ago. And he said yes. And my next statement was, how dare you, you racist liar. What do you know about Bengalis? Who gave you the authority to spiel on the BBC about Bengalis, you racist liar? Now, he didn't expect that, did he? And what happened was that a mental slave boy, who apparently claimed ownership of that shop, was shivering in fear because his master was being attacked by me. So in his nervousness, this mental slave boy said words to the effect that I should leave his shop immediately. You know who you are, boy. Don't confront me. You lent me a sum of money in Brick Lane. And every time since then I have tried to return that money to you. You said, Bhai Sahib, you are my elder brother. How dare you, boy? You liar. I will return that money to you. If necessary, I'll force that money on you. The reason I'm mentioning that is because you had no idea why I even had to ask you for any small amount of loan at that moment. You have no idea. It wasn't for me to eat. It was to pay for a particular emergency bill caused by the liar, mental slaves, including Luthu Raman. So the liars, the chores that Imran Khan has been talking against in his jalsas, those chores are in Brick Lane. Those chores were in East Pakistan. Shaitanar Bachain. Sur. Suror Fuain Sur. When we held a demonstration outside the Brady Center, I think on the 22nd of September 2005, against the Crossrail exhibition being staged there. By we, I mean me, K. Jordan, Annetta Pedretti, and I think at that stage it was Lucy Rogers as well, plus others. We did that as part of many demonstrations and street actions defending the community against the Crossrail attack. How many criminals that are in the Tower Hamlets Council now in various capacities? How many criminals even now understand what we were doing by defending the community against the Crossrail plot? These same criminals use the Brady Center and other spaces for holding events that include they are congratulating one another. These criminals have no idea. They have no idea of their bankruptcy. I confronted the crook, Michael Crook, regardless of the crook's perception about who my relations were. You shaitan, Michael Crook. I have no relation. If by relation you mean blood relation. I don't come from a background of blood relations except the saint Bedshah. the contemporaries who could be related biologically to me in some ways are no different from the others. It is their character. It is their character. It is their character alone that must be the criteria for assessing, analyzing, evaluating them. It is an accident of birth. It's an accident of birth that they may be related biologically by some form to me. But that's it. I have defeated crooks at all levels, liars at all levels, long before anybody heard of Imran Khan as anything to do with anything political, social. And I have been doing this consistently throughout, regardless. Michael Crook, who was born in West Bengal, concealed the fact that he was born in West Bengal. That's the secret. He remains alien to the truth and alien to the community. In March 2007, at an event being held in the Bow area, I think Bow West, a location that was, I think, a church or church-related building. And the venue had been paid for, the hiring the venue had been paid for by George Galloway. George Galloway boasted at that event that he had paid for the hiring. What George Galloway, the racist, didn't understand was that all his hiring abilities we shall come back. I am coughing now, so I need a break. Come back, definitely come back.